They're like clear, they're like clear.
Come to Cottonwood Heights, you get issued a dog if you don't already.
Yeah. Sorry.
Hi, guys.
Good afternoon.
That's okay. They may just be waiting for us to go.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, there we go. Hello.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, guys. Was just wondering if I was missing audio, so
Just checking in.
loud and clear.
Jessica, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. Thanks for checking in.
Excellent.
How's your long commute?
Hasn't started yet. I've got a
Oh my
couple more
gosh.
days. Monday.
Wow. Well, that's exciting. Okay, we ready? Okay. We're recording? Okay. We'd like to welcome everybody to the July 5th Cottonwood Heights Planning Commission work session. And acknowledge that we have a couple of our members that are operating remotely, but we do have a quorum here in the room. We just have one major item to cover in our agenda. And we do have a couple of items in our business session, but for this particular meeting, we're really excited to hear from our Public Works Department staff, and they've been busily working with a contractor, talking about the transportation master plan. And the city council has been involved with this. I don't know how closely our commissioners have been following this, but there's been a lot of back and forth already, and they've been giving us a bite at the apple here to kind of review what's been done so far and give some feedback and some maybe a little bit of direction, but a lot of really great work has been done. So we're really excited for the opportunity for a deep dive as we're going through this, either for the public or for the planning commissioners. There are some embedded links in our agenda to some attached documents that may be of interest to you. I mean, this is a tricky thing because they're bringing together work from a couple different sources, and most of it's congruent. Some of it, I don't know that it directly conflicts, but there's a question of trying to prioritize things. But this is a good chance to ask clarifying questions. I had a chance a few years ago to be involved with a study related to roads, and so this is a really good chance to just kind of understand where we're going to go. And you know, if you haven't had a chance, there's a 10-year, 20-year, 30 years. I mean, we've kind of benchmarked this with dollars and projects, and so I'm really excited about this presentation. And I'm expecting that we'll do the majority of discussion here, but we'll be mic'd up and continue the discussion as well when we get together in the business session. So I think this is
not scheduled for business meeting tonight. So this is just work session introduction.
Oh, very good.
Yep.
Okay, so then really the only item that we'll have will be the general public comments and the chair election.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep. Should be a short
great.
business
Well,
meeting.
terrific.
All right,
Take
well,
it
thank you. So yeah, this is a presentation on the transportation master plan, which is something that the city's been working on for the last 2 years almost. Let me share my screen. Okay, so transportation, this is Cottonwood Heights Transportation Master Plan. Now, so what is a transportation master plan? That serves as kind of a unifying document of all the previous plans that have been put together by the city. This will be the first one for Cottonwood Heights, this first grand master plan that kind of incorporates a lot of the different previous plans. The most recent one that was done previously was in 2019, which was a capital facilities plan. And in that plan, there was a transportation model that went out 20 years. And then this plan goes out all the way to 2050. So it takes it a step further. It also includes the active transportation master plan that was done in conjunction with I'm not sure the agency, but it's the Mid-Valley Active Transportation Plan with included Midvale, Sandy, Holiday City. And it also incorporates master plan documents into the model, such as future plans, such as the gravel pit, future development. Now, developing the transportation model takes us up to 2050, and the model uses a regional backbone, a regional support called From Wasatch Front, which is the TAS model, which is kind of it analyzes the population in zones. But first, so these are the goals of the Transportation Master Plan, to improve transportation planning and implementation, prioritize efforts based on community and identify mobility goals, identify future projects to improve pedestrian safety, walkability, and traffic flow, improve active transportation networks, to promote alternative transportation use. Just briefly, we have gone through a number of iterations with feedback from City Council. This started back in November of 2022, and then we got comment and went back to council in January, and then again in April of 2023. So what you guys are going to see and what is in your packet is kind of like the final draft, where we can get input and comment from you guys. But as part of that back and forth, we added, or we clarified some of the active transportation stuff that had been shown in other plans, and we highlighted them more in these. Also in this report are updated cross sections for different types of roadway classifications, like urban collectors, urban arterials, and those are shown as well. And then the transportation model, as I said, it goes up to 2050, and it identifies a level of service, which is kind of how well the road is functioning with all the cars that are on it.
Adam, can you tell them what the letters mean, like the A through?
Yeah, I have that.
Is that going to come up?
There's a slide in
Awesome.
there that shows that, yeah. So first off, what was the data that was used in the model? What you can see up here is it's a population graph that kind of shows over the years the population of Cottonwood Heights based off of the census data, and then it takes it out to 2050. You can see, so this is the estimated population of 41,800, and that comes from the gravel pit. Most of the growth is shown from the gravel pit. And now a TAS model, it says at the bottom, uses socioeconomic data. What that means is it includes the people living in the zones. And if we go to this is the TAS map, and this is the 2050 population. So it includes the people that are living in the area, but it also includes the economic opportunities. So the businesses, kind of the people that come into the area to work and shop. So it includes not just the residents, not just the population, but it also includes employment as well. So this is the map.
Does that include commuting as well, just some of the main arteries?
Well, the commuting shows up in the traffic counts.
Okay.
So, but if they're going through the city, it wouldn't show up in the TAS model. But there is the way the model Wasatch Front makes this model, and it includes the whole valley. So, and the different zones influence one another. So they do look at people coming in and going out, and they assign values to that. So depending on what the traffic patterns are showing, they take that commuter population into account.
Great.
But these numbers are just population for employment and the actual residents. So that's the model those are the base numbers that were used as part of this 2050 model. What you have here and what's in your report is the existing roadway network. So the city, I believe last year, updated their classifications for different roadways. we have a number of different types of roadways ranging from residential up to arterial. And then there was also urban core and urban arterial was also added to that. And based off of those different classifications, the report has recommended different cross sections, such as Fort Union has its own special one, and that's based off of the previous master plan that was done for Fort Union corridor. So this is showing the existing roadway network, urban core arterial 7-lane, all the way down to urban collector 2-lane. So an urban collector 2-lane would be 2300 East, 17th East, Greenfield is shown on there. So those are kind of the smaller collector roads that are feeding into the larger arterials.
Adam, is Highland Drive ours?
Yes, Highland
Yes,
Drive
okay.
is a city road. That is
Okay,
correct.
I thought that was a UDOT road. Okay.
No, it's a city road.
Okay.
And it's shown as a urban core arterial 7-lane and urban core arterial 5-lane. The only road that's not ours is Wasatch Boulevard. SR 210 and SR 190 would be UDOT roads. So these are the updated cross sections. You have the local 2-lane local is going to be your residential road, just your local street. And then 2-lane urban collector with a bike lane and no parking, or 2-lane urban collector with parking. The 2-lane urban collector, that's 2700 East, 2300 East,
Can you,
Danish Road.
what is a bike lane?
So a bike lane is, there's a lot of different types of bike lanes, right? But a bike lane is a lane designated for, I guess I'll just say alternative transportation for bicyclists, right? It's different than a sidewalk because a sidewalk would function for pedestrians, right? And then you have different, there are other functions that have both pedestrians and bicyclists. But
You know,
the
like-
bike lane in the road would function just for bicyclists, right?
So, yeah, part of my issue is when I'm on a bicycle and I think I'm in a bike lane, cars think they also own a lot of that.
Yeah, and so there's different types of bike lanes. There's shared bike lanes where the road is shared between the automobile and the bicyclist. And then there are type 2 bike lanes or dedicated bike lanes where there's actual delineations or, striping markings, right? These are showing on the urban collectors, and there's been a pretty big effort to include bike lanes in future design of cross sections. Maybe one of the challenges is going to be that the city is built out and the roads are already built, right? So for the most part, these cross sections are not, they're for new roads essentially, right? Or if we are to upgrade the road, this is kind of what we're looking at. But and then in our active transportation program, we have a lot of different types of options for bike lanes, whether it's a trail or a cycle track or just a bike lane in the road. So
I know I've ridden in Park City a little bit, and most of the bike lanes up there are separate. From the
yeah,
road.
and those
That's
are
what
more, those used to be called type 1 bike lanes, but essentially they're a bike lane that is completely separate from the roadway. Like what we did for the Big Cottonwood Canyon Trail. That one would be a dedicated bike lane, not a dedicated, it's a
That's a shared use path.
shared use path, yeah.
But then what you see on Fort Union is kind of a physically separated bike lane. And I think that would be reflected.
Yeah,
in
let's
the
go
Fort
to
Union
Fort
cross-section.
Union, because that is the interesting one. This is a 3-lane urban arterial. And 5 and 7-lane urban arterial, those would be 13th East and 30th East. And they're pretty much reflecting what's already existing. 5-lane urban core arterial, that would be Highland Drive. Between Creek Road and the bottom of the hill. I forget the name of that road, but and then the 7-lane, actually, sorry, the 7-lane is from Creek Road to the bottom of the hill.
Are you talking about Popper Hill?
No, on Highland Drive, on Highland Drive. There is one spot on Highland that has bike lanes. And then, so this is Fort Union. You can see what we have here are two different cross sections. The one at the bottom is the one that Mike is referring to with the bike lane outside of the roadway. And this is planned to go in from Union Park up to, is it up to 30th East? I would think,
Yeah.
I would
yeah, for the
believe,
most part, yeah.
yeah, so up to 30th East. So that's showing a 6-foot sidewalk and a 6-foot bike lane on both sides of the road, along with the park strip. So that would be a shared use path with room for both pedestrians and bicyclists. And then above that, the urban core arterial Fort Union 3-lane is from 30th East up to Wasatch Boulevard. And this cross section is showing a bike lane in the roadway. And then it's also identified a multi-use path. It shows it as 20 feet, but that's kind of the area. The trail itself would be 10 feet. And that is a planned improvement from 30th East up to Wasatch Boulevard on Fort Union on the north side of the road. And that would connect to the big Cottonwood Canyon Trail.
So Adam, just reflecting on that, so how much of this is completely congruent with the Fort Union master plan in those segments?
So that bottom one comes from the Fort Union master
Okay,
plan.
like the dimensions and,
Yeah, what this is essentially the Fort Union master plan, very high level, saying, hey, these kind of things would be cool. This is a document that attempts to quantify, okay, let's actually engineer that, what that would look like, because the Fort Union plan, you probably remember, had different segments of the corridor. And there were different recommendations for different segments on how to do bike lanes and on-street parking and not. And it also didn't fully take into account the power lines that are there. So this is an engineering drawing that kind of accounts for some of the hurdles that are there, the power lines, the big transmission lines that you can't relocate or move really functionally. It leaves the park strip, puts the bike lane behind the park strip so you can work around it. And that reflects what we see on the project at 1700 East and the one at Brook Hill Drive, where you see, if you drive out there, you can see a big asphalt trail and then a sidewalk behind it. That's what this.
Yeah, that's that cross section. And then the one above it is the one that includes the trail, which that's more of an updated plan that the city has.
Yeah, the idea up east of 30th is there's that hillside overlooking Big Cottonwood Canyon Road. There's a lot of right-of-way shoulder area that could be really transformed into some sort of recreational pathway that is also a functional active transportation route. So that
I believe that's shown on the Mid-Valley plan. I think
that is, yeah.
So
All of these documents have iterated and gotten more details from the Fort Union plan to where we are now.
so that's why when we start doing any development along Fort Union Boulevard, since doing this all in one big chunk, you hear that from me, I hit that button every time we start talking about any project on Fort Union. Are we asking the developer to incorporate the Fort Union master plan in terms of what they're building out, what the curb and gutter looks like, so we can at least idealize different segments if we can't connect it all right now? Anyway.
very good. So this process of the transportation master plan, it is a high level look at the traffic in the city. It included, like I said, the Wasatch Front PAS model, and then it did an analysis on the roadway and intersection level of service. And that was based off of the daily traffic volumes that were collected. It's not a synchro model, that's more of a detailed look at the intersections. So this study is more of the roadways, although we do make recommendations for intersections. Now, level of service, you guys mentioned level of service. So level of service represents the congestion and delay on the roadway or the intersection. The best level of service is an A, and a severely congested level of service is an E or an F. So everything up to a level of service D, according to the engineers, is considered acceptable, right? It's where you start to see the failure once you get into E and F.
But that's based on those daily counts, right?
It's based off of delay, right?
Got
And then there is an attempt to just look at the roads. And so right here, roadway level of service, this is the acceptable. So these numbers right here are assuming a level of service of D or better. So if you get higher than these numbers, then you would consider that level of service to be unacceptable, if that makes sense.
What months do they do these studies?
So the data that was collected was mainly used from data that the city had previously. So we collected data. We had Horrocks Engineering, who is the engineer that put this report together and did the model. They collected this data mostly back in 2019, but then there was also data that we had that UDOT collects on an annual basis. And then they have it based off of a number of different sources. So it's quite, but it's supposed to be, I believe what UDOT does is they have a factor based off of the date, based off to adjust it.
Okay.
So it's supposed to be based off of have an adjustment factor.
Any seasonal contingency out of?
Yeah, it's a seasonal adjustment factor.
Okay.
So roadway level of service, like I said, this would be the acceptable, and you can see that as 2 lanes all the way up to 7. So a 2-lane arterial acceptable volume is 13,400. For the intersections, you're looking at delay. You're looking at the time that people are waiting through, like if you waited a light and then get delayed past that, that would be your signalized intersection delay. And that's seconds per vehicle. So 35 seconds would be 35 to 55 would be a level of service D. And like I said, this report or this model focused primarily on the roadways because it was not a synchro model. It was a model that looked at the volumes of the roads. To do the intersections, it's a kind of a separate thing.
So we've got Jessica's got her, Commissioner Chapel has her hand up.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hey, I was just wondering, I think you might have just answered my question, but I was wondering if there was any data about public transit service, like the number of buses that come through in high traffic areas, if it comes into play at all in these ratings.
Yeah, the volume does. We didn't, the city, I don't know if there was a separate data collected from UTA though. On the number of people using the buses. If that makes sense. So this is the existing level of service. I don't know, is there a way to?
It looks better on the TV. Yeah, it's hard to see on the projector.
So does green mean good?
So green is acceptable. Oh, it does look good.
Yeah, it's much better on the TV screen, so.
Okay, so green is acceptable and orange is acceptable, but orange is D. Okay, and then green is anything A, B, or C, and then unacceptable is anything worse than an E, so E or F. And for the most part, the existing level of service is acceptable for the roadways. Now there is Park Center Drive was identified as having a higher volume. It was 12,100, so it's right on the cusp of starting to be unacceptable. And then also parts of Union Park Avenue. So keep in mind, this is the 2020 volume or 2019, I guess, volume. Hopefully the next one. Jessica and Jonathan.
And Jonathan, great.
Yes. Go right ahead.
Is it okay if I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so when I read over the TMP originally on the packet, I mean, my first question that stood out, because this came up with another land use application we saw, was the traffic data and the timing of it. So I'm curious, I think you said this was 2019 or 2020 traffic data?
Yes.
Has there been any thought or consideration in terms of looking at the updates, just kind of the pre-COVID, post-COVID traffic patterns in terms of especially for people that are commuting and whatnot? I don't know what the data looks like in Cottonwood Heights for that.
Well, what I had seen was that there was about maybe a 30% reduction during COVID.
Yeah.
And that for the most part is returned to normal. And I don't think we can look into it, but I don't think we have plans to go out and collect, new data. It's from what I had seen is there was quite a dip during the initial period and then it has slowly recovered and we're almost back to normal.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my knee-jerk reaction that's probably the case. The other kind of question I would have on the traffic data and the projections is there's been a lot of talk in the Wall Street Journal, et cetera, just in terms of the commercial rental participation rates. And I'm curious as Gen Z gets integrated more and more into the workforce, the models in terms of the in-office versus remote versus hybrid, are those models going to hold true? Because I assume that all the modeling is based off of current traffic flows, current kind of workforce participation in offices, and that may not hold to be true going forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know.
I think just making observations from Wasatch Front's regional transportation plan, their valley-wide, kind of similar version of this that they do. They always project out to, you'll see this one projects out to 2050. They plan in like 30-year chunks, and they're always looking to plan for 30 years in advance. But then they update that plan every 2 or 3 or 4 years. So
Right.
I think by updating that fairly regularly, you catch those trends over time, because I think you'd see changes in those area specific population models. If those offices are suddenly more vacant during the day, that has
Yeah,
population.
it would be upgraded in the TASMA.
So I think what would be important is, we can try through the general plan and other methods to try to proactively plan for changing trends in the market and things like that. But then when we look at the actual data, I think it's probably more important than anything else to make sure we're updating this plan on a regular basis instead of waiting 10, 15 years. So then we can catch those trends as they're happening and change the plans, right away instead of retroactively kind of responding to it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that kind of always sticks out of my mind, and I think this is accurate, but I haven't looked at it in a bit, but I think the Utah population and workforce population generally is younger than the national averages. And so then it just becomes this question of what happens with that. Because what work looked like 20 years ago certainly isn't what it looks like today. And, is it going to look the same 20 years from now? But as long as we're kind of planning for that, I think that's all you can really do. It's just a good guess anyways, or best guess.
Yeah, I think that to me is where the importance of public works and engineering collaborating with land use planning, collaborating with active transportation planning, and you're trying as much as possible to make sure all these plans talk the same language and are on the same page with each other. And then they're trying to proactively plan for the same trends that, we see evidence of it now, so we can put things in place. And then as things start happening, we can continue to update everything kind of cohesively and make sure we're responding appropriately.
Thanks.
Chapel.
Sorry, I just hadn't lowered my hand. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
have another comment right now.
Oh, great.
Thank
That's
you.
okay. We always like to hear from you.
Excellent.
As you observe that before we move on,
Yeah.
is this reflective of what your experience has been? I mean, any observations generally? Because I do feel like, we represent some different geographic areas. Is this reflective of your boots on the ground experience? Just looking at places around your neighborhoods, or are there places where you think to yourself, okay, when we gather data again in a couple of years, let's check that number? Or do you feel like that's pretty accurate?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I travel a lot on Treat Road, that's down in my neighborhood. And I don't generally have any problem. I agree with the green there. I do wonder about extrapolating data from 2020 when we were in the midst of COVID still.
Well, the data wasn't, that was when the report was put together. So the data was,
2019.
yeah,
Okay.
it
And
was.
the park center you have in red there. My experience there, when I'm turning left back onto Fort Union Avenue or Union Park Avenue, from Home Depot there. That's often a
Yeah.
congested area,
Yeah,
but usually going around that corner there is not too bad. So I don't know, but red represents my experience.
It's right on the cusp.
Yeah.
It really is.
I joke that that's where the line is for Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out, starting right there at that intersection. So they've woven all around the Walmart parking lot, they're taking it out into the street.
I'm sorry, I didn't buy a Chick-fil-A franchise, but the other thing I'm thinking is, I don't think we have any idea really what life is gonna be like in 2050. So I agree with the idea that we do the best we can and then we adjust as we go.
Yeah.
But one of the things I anticipate is that, like electric bicycles, we're seeing more and more every day, it seems like. And I think, the bike lane issue may become a bigger issue in the future when we have more people on bike lanes.
Yeah.
And less people in car lanes.
Sure.
And I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen.
We have one city council member that is highly passionate about that, and I love my bike too, but I do think that the hills, as we kind of overcome that with electronic bikes, we'll see more of those bikes, and I appreciate that that's woven into this quite a bit. The other question I might point out too is that, and this is a new variable that's just popped up, we've now acquired a piece of land at Hillside Plaza, and that we don't know exactly what that will be. Will it require the traffic flow of an In-N-Out and a Chick-fil-A, or will it be more of a quiet, more residential-ish or somewhere in between? So
Okay. And
hard to
as those
anticipate.
plans are updated, then this can be updated as well. This is kind of like a living document that can incorporate future plans.
I really appreciate how you guys are addressing this.
Have you guys thought of any BRTs in the east-west corridors?
Well, so the Wasatch Front has, as Mike said, they have a long-range plan that includes it includes transit, pedestrian or transit roadway, and then bicyclists. So there is a transit plan, and I believe, just off the top of my head, I think what Wasatch Front had identified was BRT, but I don't believe it was in the first phase. I think it was more in a phase 2 or phase 3. Which
That's
would
good.
put it, I'd have to look into it.
Yeah, I just see a BRT, especially with the east-west corridor. You can see it's very mixed on Port Union. And seasonally, you get a lot of mixed congestion there. And, I think if there was some good central hubs, especially with the amount of parking, closer to Union Park and proximity to the freeways as well, I think having a bus rapid transit system could be very interesting there, especially if we're going to, what is it, a 5-lane extension or a 6-lane extension for Port Union? Is that kind of the plan, 40 years?
So we can get to the recommendations in a minute,
Okay.
but there's just like a spoiler, that there are no lane improvements that are showing new lanes, except for what would you call it? There are, sorry about that. There are operational improvements that include shoulder widening, intersection improvements, bus turnouts, turn pockets, and center medians, but we don't have a lot of projects that are recommending an increase in capacity.
Okay.
But let's get to that. So this is the existing level of service. This is the no build 2032. So that would be if nothing is done according to the model, what you're looking at. I think 2300 East has churned to unacceptable, but it's really just an increase of 300 cars. So it's just on the cusp still. And then also Wasatch Boulevard is the other one that is now shown. This number says 15,700. So these are just kind of on the cusp. And then this is the 2050 no build. You can see the numbers haven't changed significantly, but you add a few thousand more cars and all of a sudden, things are feeling a bit more congested, right? So this is the no build level of service. Recommended roadway projects. I hope you can, this is very clear. So this table is broken up by phasing. Projects 1, then there's projects 2 and projects 3. Those are the 3 phases. Phase 1 is 2023. to 2032. Phase 2 is 2033 to 2042, and phase 3 is 2033 to 2050. So they're broken up by year. You can see the location of the project, the type of improvement, the projected phase of unacceptable level of service. So there are 2 projects with an identified unacceptable level of service, and that's 2300 East and Park Center. And the recommended improvement for Park Center is to reconfigure the roadway from 2 lanes to 3 lanes. So add a center turn lane. 2300 East has improved pedestrian safety and walkability and reconfigure roadway from 2 lanes to 3 lanes. Again, that's just the 3rd lane would be a center turn lane.
Sorry, quick question. On the one of the questions I had was on the 2300 East about improving pedestrian safety and walkability.
Yes.
There's no sidewalk there now, so is
That's
part
where we would go, yeah.
and a bike lane as well, do you think?
So there is a bike lane, but it has it's not consistent in its width, right? So an improvement, a road project on 2300 East would look at, making kind of more of a standard, standard cross section that we have with bike lane. It would include right of way, but you'd have sidewalk and a consistent bike lane. Park Center Drive, Fort Union Boulevard, and 2300 East intersection, and that is identified as it's an anticipated failure based on the volume of the roadways. So that's improvements to the intersection where that new development would be. And that would be improving bicycle safety through the intersection and then adding auxiliary turn lanes at the intersection. So improving the intersection so the bicyclists can get through the intersection safely, and then having the additional turn movements that aren't necessarily there today. The other ones listed are Highland Frontage and La Cresta, and also Highland Drive from Fort Union Boulevard to reconfigure it from 6 to 7 lanes. Phase 2, you have Fort Union Boulevard, 30th to Wasatch Boulevard, 2600 East, Danish Road, and 30th East. All of those are operational projects to improve pedestrian safety, walkability, and traffic flow without adding lane capacity. The Wasatch Boulevard one also says multi-use trail, which is tied to the active transportation, Mid-Valley Active Transportation Plan.
So is that the portion out of,
The Wasatch Boulevard?
So UDOT pay for that one?
So I should clarify. So Wasatch Boulevard, our Wasatch Boulevard is SR 210 to the South City boundary, which I'll go back to the map for you. It is that red section right there. That is the city-owned Wasatch Boulevard. It is past the split, past the Lakai split.
So 13 million for that section? Well, that seems like a small number of people in the city.
Yeah,
that
and
are benefited.
I would
from that
take
road
off,
improvement.
what I'll do, I wouldn't, don't look at the numbers, because
Okay.
those will need to be.
Which is just
updated.
fine. It's just like, incrementally, it's like the first 4 numbers put together to equal that. And in terms of the number of.
Yeah, that's something I will look into. I'm not,
As a cyclist, I'm okay with the status quo.
I know he put in based off of.
And the
inflation,
Gavarni
but
people don't, they've got a great walking system in their development. I'd love to hear from them if they feel differently, but anyway, thank you for that.
So, yeah, we will take a look at the estimated project costs, because those could be refined. We also have, but as I was saying, all of those roads are operational projects, not recommending additional lanes. Phase 3, 3500 East Bengal Boulevard, it's showing a roundabout at that intersection. We also have 17th East, 7200 South, Fort Union Boulevard, Highland Drive, Union Park Avenue, and Creek Road. all as operational projects.
Let's pause for just a second there, because that's a lot, so.
also-
Thoughts, questions,
It's also a
comments?
long way out.
I think
That's awesome.
my only kind of thought process behind this is being able to blend UDOT's and potentially some of the adjacent communities. Adjustments to this plan as well, you know, from a countywide standpoint, because I believe specifically Highland Drive and Wasatch. As well as, you know, parts of Fort Union, they're massive commuter corridors for us, where I think some of the data that we're going to be pulling, that's going to be more so discussing the current residence data. I think we're seeing a lot more traffic from Draper and Sandy.
So, and just to help clarify that point, so these phase 3 projects, the ones that say phase on them, that means they're coming from Wasatch Front Regional Council's long-term plan, which is the plan that you're referring to, that encompasses the whole valley. So they have on that plan Highland Drive all the way from Draper to the freeway. And what we have is, you know, reconfigure from 4 to 5 to 7 lanes, which, you know, that's their plan. I don't know if that'll happen here, if we really want that, but that's from the long range plan. It's listed as phase 3, which means 2030 to 2050.
Yeah.
Which is, we tried to kind of incorporate what the city's vision is and hopefully try to get from what the community wants to see, you know, with walkability and bike traffic.
So
I love the direction.
on that point, Adam, for 3.4, I mean, I'm just dismayed to see that one so far down the list, just because. And I know that we're talking about it as we get individual projects, but I see that so far down the list, when what I hear from residents is figuring out, cracking the code on the walkability of Fort Union, that and I mean, there are more than one ways. I know that, again, that we have a city council member that is advocating for other places besides, you know, just the main road. I'm up for all sorts of different solutions, but I do think that weaving into this, as we figure out, okay, what are we doing with the road, figuring out how that's going to interact at different places. So anyway, just that little bit of feedback. And then one question I have, at any point have we considered for that intersection, we've had such great success with this roundabout right out the window here. Have we considered on Fort Union, you know, especially in light of the property purchase, obviously a lot of people things would have to be congruent, but could we do a roundabout at 23rd East and Fort Union?
I mean, it's something that we'd have to look at.
And there's 4 separate property owners and we're not one of them at that intersection, but I'm just the hypothetical is that.
I mean,
I think, so we have funding to do a site-specific master plan for that site that will lead into redevelopment. Part of the scope of that process is looking at ways to make the transportation network around it more conducive to a town center type environment. Still has to accommodate traffic, and we'll know, you know, that will set the vision for how much, you know, intensity we have at that site and how much traffic it will generate. And that will lead into a vision for the roadway as well. So I think hold tight for a handful of months, and that will be part of that master plan process of envisioning what could happen there to make it feel more like a town center, still accommodate traffic, and we'll have real information and data to back that up.
And obviously it will depend on what tenants we get. I mean, of course, I mean, I don't know that the residents, generally speaking, are in favor of like a big box retailer, but at the same time, a big box retailer generates a lot of taxable income, which, I mean, those are offsets potentially, but the traffic flow is dramatically wide. And I mean, also the new quiet, scary issue is that if Google Maps or Apple Maps send people that are going from outside of Cottonwood Heights on one side to outside of Cottonwood Heights on the other side, and the route that it takes them on is onto Fort Union Boulevard. I mean, from a value standpoint for our community, we have to decide, do we want the fastest way to be through the heart of, you know, Cottonwood Heights, and if not, are we okay with the fact that the level of service slows us down a little bit, that, you may have to wait an extra light or two. Is that an acceptable value to the community? If the alternative is, well, now it's only people from Cottonwood Heights. We took the speed limit down. We, discussed at length about how many lanes and though just the values for the community. And I don't know what the answers are. I'm not ready to put my finger on the scale, but I do think that you've provided this wonderful framework for discussion. So.
Yeah. There are other, go ahead.
Just a quick comment, a little bit of a concrete issue. Speaking of walkability, if you look at that space between Castle Creek Inn on Creek Road, and there's a duplex just east of there, several duplexes. There's a sidewalk on the north side of the road.
Yeah.
You're walking down there, and the sidewalk ends, and you go out into the street, and then enter back onto the sidewalk in front of the Castle Creek.
Yeah, it's just one property has the gap, yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
That'd be nice.
one property.
That'd be nice to have a sidewalk there.
We have a few of those little orphan
Yeah.
spots, don't
Do
we?
we?
Yeah, that happens.
We had identified that.
Typically, when we seek funding, this is a little bit outside the scope of this plan, but it's, I think, helpful. When we seek funding, all the funding sources are regional funding sources. Wasatch Front Regional Council, UDOT, Salt Lake County. So your projects typically have to show up on one of their plans, on one of their maps somewhere, and be of some sort of regional significance. Filling an island, where there's just a one property sidewalk gap, typically doesn't rise to that level. We've applied for one farther down on Creek Road on numerous times and not ever gotten it. So what that comes down to is that becomes a local, we put that in the local priority list for the city council to fund and prioritize. And sometimes they get funded and sometimes they don't. Right now, I'm sure you're familiar with it. We're moving forward on 1700 East because we have an extended gap there. But then we are aware we have pockets like this everywhere and it's ideal to fill them in. Another way to do it is those properties can redevelop and you can require that when they're redeveloped, but you can't predict that as much. So
Yeah, but we do have that one on the list.
What about public right of ways that don't have those, that would be more life safety situations? On, city owned spaces, is that something that we are?
It's all a matter of, we're absolutely, there is a map, I think, in this report that shows no sidewalk.
Okay.
And then it's just a matter of prioritizing funding.
Perfect.
But like Mike said, we're doing the sidewalk on 17th East. And then looked at other roads as well that have gaps, and we're always looking at funding grants to kind of like when there's it's on a safe walking plan, there's grants available for gaps in sidewalks.
So Commissioner Chapel and Commissioner Edward both had hand raised at one point. Is that a new hand, Commissioner Chapel?
Thanks.
It is. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So this has all been really, really great discussion, and I find myself, even though I have a civil engineering degree, learning a ton more about this. I am, I was looking at the discussion about the roundabout on 35th East and Bengal, and as I live near that area, and I have a middle schooler that uses a bus pickup on 3500 East and Creek. And I noticed in all of these plans, whether it was no projects being done, that we don't have a reduced level of service for that road. And so knowing what I know about that bus stop and about the many near misses that one of my neighbors who lives on that corner has seen, I learned from another relative that is a Salt Lake City transportation engineer that once a road becomes a collector, so that road has 2 lanes and a median, that special rules apply. And so when I asked him about what is possible for traffic calming or creating a safer place for a bus stop, he actually told me I need to be looking for accident records so that I can have a case to ask for traffic calming in that area. So my question in the context of this meeting is there a possibility to downgrade a road? Like could 3500 East be downgraded to a local two street road because it's a low capacity road. Doesn't really make sense as a collector. It's really just a shortcut from Bengal to Wasatch, which I don't think, is appropriate. But as a local resident, and that is a major school bus location, there's a safety concern there. So I'm curious, have changes to roads been looked at the other direction to make them more walkable, to make them more bike or pedestrian friendly? Or is there an opportunity to do that at this time?
Well, it's not something we looked at for this study. It's something that 3,500 is kind of a unique situation because the road is not necessarily a very high volume, but it has a very wide pavement section. So I think there would be potentials, projects that could be looked at. It's listed as the urban collector. So that's just a minor collector is essentially what it is, which is similar to roads such as like Greenfield and Danish Road. So moving it to a local, I'd have to look into that, but it's something that, the city could look at. There is a traffic calming process that, looks at these kind of things, including accident data, traffic volume. But ultimately, everything comes down to, priorities and budgets set by the city council. So.
Great question and great point. Commissioner Ebler, we've got 4 minutes, and I'm going to recommend that if it's possible that we could continue this at some future date. This is a great conversation, and Adam, I'm sorry if our questions have disrupted the pace in your presentation.
I could finish in 4 minutes.
But I would tell you, I rather that I don't want us to feel rushed. So
well, let's just show you the rest.
Okay.
And decide, okay?
Especially since this will go to city council, and this is probably our main bite at the apple.
So this we already saw: projects, meet future demand. This is the proposed active transportation backbone network. So we're pretty much at the end of the presentation. This is the part that was included to show from Mid-Valley's active transportation plan. We've included a number of the multi-use paths on Highland Drive. The only thing that needs to change on here, we're doing a multi-use path on Bengal Boulevard from Highland Drive up to City Hall as well. Other than that, though, these are all multi-use path, buffered bike lanes. In your report, there is a map showing the existing backbone network. And that is it. That was the last slide. So are there any other questions? There is more information in the report if you have other questions.
I do think that we would probably enjoy a little bit more discussion. Commissioner Ebler, do you have a quick question, or do you want to forego that for a future time when we bring it again?
Just a really quick comment, just looking at the level of service map at 2300 and Fort Union. I think I heard Mike say that there was funding towards that, and so I'll just kind of reserve that. But if the intent is to really turn the development into a pedestrian-oriented town center, you've got to pay pretty close attention to kind of the traffic interaction at that, especially given that the level of service for the stoplights unacceptable, and you have level of service D basically boxed in around that. So just a quick comment. I'll put a pin in it.
And we really do appreciate this, especially given the last newly formed road in Cottonwood Heights through the Racket Club property. It was the first time that we formed a new road in terms of the city, but with the possibilities of Racket Club or the gravel pit property and the Canyon Center property, we've got some big stuff. And so making sure that there's alignment between parks and trails, open space, this group, and staff, making sure we can all sing off the same sheet of music as you guys interact with, possible developers and look at these opportunities. I think it just, us being unified as closely as possible, I think will bear fruit. So thanks for your patience with us. I know that was a lot, so.
Question for the commission, do you want to see this back specifically in the work session, or should we proceed? This has to go through public comment at the planning commission as well. It can be there as long as you want it there. Would you like to proceed to that public comment phase to start getting input? Or bring it back for more just work session discussion?
I'd like a little more work session discussion. Our agendas have been light, and whether we have Adam here, or if you feel comfortable answering the questions. And we hate to drag you in for another evening here, Adam, but it means a lot.
He doesn't stay late enough.
Yeah.
It's okay.
He's got, making it sound like you got a good life, Adam.
Okay, that's good direction.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
thank
that's the end. I'll entertain one final motion here for our work session.
Motion to adjourn. Second. Or
Okay, did you get the names on that one?
I can-
Okay. We've got a motion,
And
okay, motion and a second. All those in favor?
I.